Good evening to everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Wanda Fridays. We'll give a sister a hug. I'm your girl, Author Erica. I have my fabulous co-host on with me, Author Kim. Today, happy Friday to everyone. As you all know, this is October. So we'll wind down Fridays. We'll give a sister a hug. This is gonna be the survival story edition. So every lady that's gonna be featured on Wind Down Fridays will give a sister a hug. Either gonna tell a story about domestic violence or breast cancer, because also October is the awareness month for domestic violence and breast cancer. So today we have our fabulous sister on with us that's gonna tell her story. Her name is Miss Wanda. So, Miss Wanda, thank you for taking time out your busy day to share your story with us. So, we're gonna give you the floor.
Okay. Hello, my name is Wanda, and I'm a domestic violence survivor. My experience with domestic violence was an unimaginable case in which I suffered from all forms of abuse: gaslighting, verbal, mental, physical, and sexual. But it's the gaslighting and mental abuse that has had the most negative and lasting effects on me. It left me devastated and silent for many years, suffering from PTSD, chronic anxiety, and major depression. I'm speaking out today for all the people who have either been there or maybe there now, or maybe you know someone that is there, to give you hope. I want you to know that I understand what you have gone through or may be going through and how it may leave you feeling overwhelmed, helpless, or hopeless. I want you to know that you do not have to stay in abuse, nor do you have to continue to live isolated as a battered woman like I did. You see, my abuser's lies kept playing in my head long after the abuse ended and kept me in an invisible web of bondage. We must learn how to cut through the lies that hold us captive. We do have free will and choice. Choose to be free and to set your children free. Don't make the mistake that I did and think just because your kids are not being hit, they're not being hurt, because that's a lie. I wish I had the information that could have changed my life and the lives of my children, but I didn't. My biggest regret was not knowing the effects that my staying or returning to my abuser has had on my oldest son. My choices did affect him. I was naive to think that it wouldn't. I can't change the choices that I've made, but I can help others to see the mistakes that I've made and the consequences of those choices, and hope that that will help open others' eyes to make better choices. The longer I stayed with my abuser, the more zombie-like I became. The man I loved had become a venomous spider to me, and like a spider watching what its prey becomes helplessly ensnared by struggling to get free, my abuser wrapped me even tighter in his web of lies, filling me with a false sense of hope, safety, and security, telling me that it was for my best interest because he loved me and he wanted to keep me safe. But those were lies. With each verbal onslaught, he penetrated my mind, injected his poison. With each physical and sexual assault, more of his poisons became a part of me. With each episode of abuse, he filled me with more and more poison. Unbeknown to me, these poisons continued to fester and grow in my mind for long after the relationship ended. Now, hear me when I say, you don't have to be dead to not be alive. I know because I was dead in most ways. My heart was beating and I was breathing, but there was a lot more to living than that. For years, I hated myself for being so stupid. I felt I was stupid for staying with my abuser and stupid for returning, not understand what I now know as my why root. Our why root is the reason why we do or don't do the things that we do or don't do. I explain the why root in my book. As a young child, I was ill with severe asthma and was in and out of hospitals a lot. Since asthma attacks can be provoked by emotions, my doctors advised me to learn how to control my emotions at a very early age. This skill only accelerated my abuse because I had become an expert at numbing, blocking, and denying my feelings. When I was a teenager, I witnessed verbal abuse, threats, and violence, so I thought that was just a normal part of life. I was raised to be a peacemaker. I jokingly used the phrase, "I'm a lover, not a fighter," for years before I realized how true those words were. I was taught to keep peace at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing myself. Now, I wasn't told those exact words, but I was inadvertently taught by my mother's example. But she was doing only what she knew, what she had witnessed her mother do when her father abused her mother. But that wasn't her fault or her mother's fault. Back in those days, women were viewed as property. They didn't have the laws that we have now.
Right.
My mother was a very educated woman who came from poverty, and after being married to my controlling father for 18 years, she dared to go against his wishes and took on numerous odd jobs while her kids were in school to pay for herself to go to college to become the teacher she dreamt to be. It was the only thing that was remotely acceptable to my father because she could work and go to school while the kids were in school and be off when we were off and still take care of all the woman's duties, keeping the house clean, keeping 3 meals a day cooked, the dishes and the laundry done, and taking care of the needs of 4 kids and a husband. My mother was an amazing woman, and anyone who knew that knew that. Anyone who knew her knew that. Now, she never said to me, "Wanda, you must obey your husband," and cowered down to his every wish. She never said, "Wanda, you must keep peace at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing yourself." She told me quite the contrary. She said to me, "Wanda, it's too late for me. I am too old. This is the way it's always been. But don't you ever let a man tell you what to do." After years of therapy and education, I've learned that sometimes we don't learn from words, but we learn from actions. And the perfect example of this is the phrase, "Do as I say, not as I do." I had just become the next generation of accepting abuse. By me tolerating the abuse, making excuses, lying and denying that I was being abused, made the abuse acceptable, not only to myself, but to my children, the next generation. I didn't know that my actions or lack of action inadvertently made the abuse acceptable. I had passed on the acceptance of abuse to the next generation, my oldest son. Now grown, he and his wife and 2 young kids had needed to move back home with me temporarily. During yet another heated argument that I had come to break up between him and his wife, I entered the room to witness him grab his wife by the ponytail and yank her to the floor, threatening her with more violence and intimidation in front of their 19-month-old daughter and 8-month-old son. And if that wasn't horrifying enough, a few days later, for no reason at all, my granddaughter grabbed a handful of her brother's hair and yanked him from his knees to the floor. They were watching the Walt Disney movie, Little Mermaid. There was no reason for her actions. She wasn't fighting or she wasn't mad at her brother. She was just mimicking what she had witnessed her father do to her mother, which her father had witnessed his stepdad do to his mother. So you see how the cycle of abuse repeats itself, generation after generation, without anyone actually teaching their kids that abuse is okay. But by accepting and tolerating abuse, making excuses for abuse, lying or denying that abuse is happening, or by deciding to stay in an abusive relationship or returning to an abusive relationship, we are sending a silent message to our kids that abuse is acceptable behavior. By not saying no to abuse, we are saying yes to it. Now, no one in the right mind would say yes to abuse, but by not saying no to abuse, we are a silent partner in continuing to make abuse acceptable behavior. Our voices were given to us to be a powerful force within us, and what we say or don't say doesn't matter, or does matter, does matter. Since I suffer from all forms of abuse, I feel I have the right to express what, in my opinion, is the most damaging. In my opinion, I feel that mental abuse is far worse than physical abuse because my physical abuse was over once it healed. My bruises faded and my broken bones mended, but the mental abuse continued to haunt me for nearly 20 years. I continued to hear the harsh words he repeated to me. "You're stupid. You're worthless. You can't do anything right." Mental and verbal abuse affects our state of mind, which lowers our self-esteem, which sets us up for accepting more and more abusive behavior because we don't believe we deserve any better. So with that in mind, I ask you, why do we feel that physical abuse is worse than mental abuse? Is it because we can physically feel it? Or is it because we can physically see it? In my opinion, it is. But yet, are we afraid of things that we can't see or can't explain? We question it. We make excuses for it. We try to explain it. Or we dismiss it entirely by saying things like, it didn't happen because I can't prove it. So we start doubting ourselves. One of the many side effects of mental abuse is self-doubt. What we can't see is harder to understand and make sense of. And because we can't see mental abuse or gaslighting, our minds can begin to play tricks on us. We ask ourselves, did it really happen, or is it my imagination? Or maybe it's not as bad as I think it is. Or maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. And it's these 4 questions that I believe make mental abuse and gaslighting so dangerous. We start to feel like we're going crazy or that we're losing our minds. This is also what makes healing from mental abuse so difficult. It's difficult to fix something you can't see. And how do you know when it's fixed if you can't see it?
Right.
This is just another reason that I'm to share my story. You see, once I got out of my abuse, I just wanted to forget it and go on with my life. I was afraid, ashamed, and embarrassed of my past. My greatest fear was my past, and I did not want to deal with it. I just wanted to forget it. In my way of thinking, I thought, what good would it do to dwell on the past? It's over, and I can't change it. Besides, dealing with it will only traumatize me. So with all those excuses, I buried the bad stuff deep within me. I thought I would eventually get over it. I thought I would eventually forget it. But no matter what I did, what I tried, or how busy I kept myself, the nightmares continued haunting me and controlling me long after the abusive relationship ended. And that's because my abuser continued to live in my head. Gaslighting does damage us. When we're repeatedly told you're stupid, you're worthless, you can't do anything right, it eventually becomes burned into your brain, starting with self-doubt, then the loss of self-esteem, and then eventually begins to distort our feelings. We stop believing in ourselves and start believing more in our abuser. All I wanted to do was to forget it ever happened, but that has never happened. For 13 years, I saw one therapist after another, but I was only getting worse. I was desperately trying to find someone to help me put the pieces of my life back together, but I was so sensitive to negative body language, I could tell the counselors were getting frustrated with my lack of progress. And believe me, so was I. I felt like I was bothering them and wasting their time. I was told things like, it's time you got over that, you need to stop dwelling on that, or it's time to put your past in your past. Therapy is supposed to help you, but it was hurting me. My psychiatrist realized that my condition was deteriorating and advised me to give the whole therapy thing a break. For 5 years, I went without counseling. I spun a cocoon, isolating myself in my room, away from the outside world. I had given up on getting better and had just accepted that this was as good as it gets, and doom and gloom was my way of life. My sense of self sustained such damage that I had lost myself. I was an empty shell, a robot doing only what I was programmed to do. I had lost the ability to fit in and belong anywhere. I saw others as intruders, and my family could not understand what I was going through or why I could not get better. And as you can imagine, this only caused me to become even more distant. The more years that had passed and I didn't get better, the more this distance became a way of life. I not only became disconnected with the world, I became disconnected with myself. I no longer knew who I was or why I was. When I returned to therapy, I was still unable to talk about my abuse, so my counselors encouraged me to write about it. At least in doing so, I was releasing some of the poisons I had held within me for so many years. When I was writing about my abuse, I finally came to the conclusion that it was impossible for me to live my life without first completing the unfinished business of my past. With the right counseling, I've learned first I had to admit that the abuse happened and that it was as bad as it was.
Right.
I could no longer lie to myself. You see, you can't confront something that doesn't exist. Next, I had to confront my past before I could learn to conquer it. Then next, I had to conquer the secrets I lived with for so many years. Now I've acknowledged the abuse and the severity of it, and I'm learning to accept the truth by confronting my past. I'm still learning to conquer, but I'm working on it. I've also learned that as long as I kept these poisons buried within me, the infection only continued to grow. I now know that the only antibiotic that will work for me on destroying these poisons I buried within me are the ones I share with you, my story. I'm shining light on my dark secret past, exposing the truth so that I no longer continue to stumble around in darkness. I'm learning to face the fears of my past so that my past can become a past and no longer rule my future or rule my present. Sorry. As embarrassing as my story may be, it is equally freeing to get it out of me. I have begun to notice some of the fog that I have been living in clearing as I can feel the poisons gradually leaving my mind, as the words and the memories are transferred from my mind onto paper in the books that I have written on Amazon. I had barely escaped with my life, and yet I continued to hold myself captive as a battered woman I once had been. I have learned that we must try not to regret our yesterdays, our fear our tomorrows, because if we do, we lose our todays. I'd like to share two scriptures with you that have been instrumental to my healing journey. The first one is Jeremiah 1:5. Before I made you in your mother's womb, I chose you. Before you were born, I set you apart for a special work. The second one is Genesis 50:20. Joseph says to his jealous brothers they had sold him into slavery, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for the good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." It was through these scriptures I now knew that God uses both the good and the bad. I believe that it's not the experiences we live through that matters, but rather how we choose to respond to what we've lived through. I believe we have choice to be bitter or better. I choose to be better. I believe we must appreciate our past and learn from it, for it has made who we are today. I believe that everything that happens to us happens for a reason. It's intended to strengthen us and to stretch us, but not to overwhelm us, divide us, or destroy us. I wasted a lot of years being angry at what I had endured. I wondered, why me? What did I do wrong? And now I know I was asking the wrong question. The question is not, why did this happen to me? The question is, who I am because it happened to me. My pain was not in vain. There is a reason I went through what I went through. What God and what my abuser intended as evil against me, God will use for the good to help others. My past does not define me, but it came very close to destroying me. So now I'm taking my pain and I'm turning it into my purpose, and I'm taking back my power. God has taken my victim and turned it into my victory. He's taken my mess and turned it into my message, and He has taken my trials and turned it into my triumph. Now, I would like to end my speech with a reminder. Abuse is abuse, whether it's gaslighting, verbal, mental, physical, or sexual. Abuse is abuse. The name of my book is Caught in a Web of Gaslighting. It's available on Amazon.com in paperback or Kindle. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with all of you.
Miss
Thank you
Wanda.
for. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to say, thank you, Miss Wanda.
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to say, thank you for sharing your story. It takes a lot of courage for some people to share their story. But at what point when you was in your domestic violence relationship that you knew you had to leave?
I'm sorry?
I say, at what point when you was in your domestic violence relationship, when did you knew it was time for you to leave that relationship?
Well, he had begun to threaten to kill me, my kids, and anyone that I loved.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to kill everybody. He said he was constantly telling me that I was the reason for murder, suicides, with that family murder and suicide. In other words, he was going to kill me, my kids, and himself because he wasn't going to go to jail.
Such a coward. Such a coward.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
What you was saying, Kim?
So with your son, now that he's grown, has he changed from that experience since, everything has come out?
No,
He hasn't. Okay. And his wife is still with him?
no.
Oh, well, that's good. That's
Yeah,
good. They're no longer together.
that's a
That
plus.
that that's good. Yeah, that's a
So
real
Miss
good
Wanda,
plus.
when you was going through the abuse, when was it, at what point you told your family that you was in this domestic violence relationship?
I didn't. They had clues, but they didn't. They didn't know. I never told them. I never told anyone. My pastor knew. He saw bruises on me when I went to church, and I eventually had to confide in him. When I asked him to pray for me, and but that's really the only person I confided in.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And sometimes pastors do have that way of helping you to feel better, to cope through the pain. So, that was understandable. So how does it make you feel, like, just even going back and looking at it, and I know you kind of got through it. How does looking at the whole situation, how does it make you feel about yourself? Like, is it something that I should have seen in that situation, or I should have left when this time, or what?
No, I just didn't know. I didn't understand. I was raised in a dysfunctional family where domestic violence was. And so I just thought that was the way it was supposed to be. I
Right.
didn't know it was different. I didn't know other people lived differently. I only knew what I had experienced. And I had experienced my stepfather abusing my mother. And my father, before that, he passed away, and he was controlling to my mother. But that's just the only example I had, so I thought that was normal. So I just tried to learn to deal with that.
So it was that generational cycle
Right.
that you
Right.
gotcha.
It
And
had been a
normally,
generation. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
I think the abuse has been going on in my family for many generations. My grandmother, her husband, my grandfather abused her. My mother saw that, and then my father abused my mother. And then when he passed away, my mother got another abuser that abused her. And then I went through it, and then I'm not knowing that how to stop the cycle. Then by my son witnessing the abuse that his stepdad did to me, he began to do to his wife.
Wow.
And when I saw it again in the next generation, my granddaughter doing that to her brother, not because she was mad, but because she was just mimicking what she had seen her father do for her, do
Right.
to his wife. And my son had seen my husband do that to me. And it wasn't until then that I realized that it was generations, many generations of abuse that had continued each generation.
Right.
Wow.
You have anything, Kim? Wow. And I mean, that's just crazy. And unfortunately, sometimes that's what happened. Like we only could do what we seen in our family and what we are taught. And
Right.
that right. And it's up to us at some point to say, um we got to stop it, but then we see certain things in the family and we go through it, but then we trying to figure out how we stop it, like in your
Right.
instance you're trying to figure out how I stop this cycle, because this is all I seen, and sometimes sometimes it's not even easy to try to stop that generational curse thing that we endure in life.
Right. Right.
So
Definitely.
yeah, so I want to say, Miss Wanda, thank you for surviving all of this. And
Yes.
where are you now in life?
Well, I'm doing much better. I found the correct counseling that I needed for me, the counselor, and she helped me turn my world around the right way and got me to start writing about my abuse because it was still difficult for me to talk about. And so I would write about it, and then I would go to the counseling sessions with her. Then we would read it and go over that. And that was the only way that I could deal with it because it was so traumatic to me. And she encouraged me to keep writing it. And I wrote what it was. I documented my abuse with my when I was going through it. I journaled everything that happened to me because
Oh,
I
okay.
thought I was going to. I thought because that's what he kept telling me that it didn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
because he was gaslighting me, if it wasn't for the journals, I would have lost my mind,
Right.
and that was his intent. And then writing became such a therapeutic escape for me. So I just wrote and wrote all my journals, and I turned them into a book.
Good. 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 That
And
that's
now
that's
it's available,
awesome.
right? It's available on Amazon.com.
Okay.
Right.
And
So
the name of it is Caught in a Web of Gaslighting.
Okay.
gotcha. And I want to say thank you so much from taking time out your busy day
Yes.
to sharing and even allowing us here at Give Us Sister a Hug to share your story with other women that's out there. So before we close, do you have any lasting words to any women or man that's out there now listening to the story?
Just know that you don't have to go through it, that there are resources there now. More and more every year we get more resources, and just find, the resource that would be, that will help you through and get out before it's too late.
Thank you so much. So I want to say thanks again a lot, and then I want to thank everyone from listening to and watching Wind Down Fridays will give us the Hug Survivor Edition, because we all go through certain situations in our lives, and everybody don't come out of some abuse, and we're excited to have women's on here that survive
Yes.
those abuse and different things that they experience. So I want to thank you guys from watching Wind Down Fridays will give us the hug, the Survivor Edition. I'm your girl, Author Erica. I have my fabulous co-host with me, Author Kim, and our special guest, Miss Wanda. So, Miss Wanda, thank you for sharing, and you guys have a nice day.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share my story.
No
God bless
problem.
you.